Welcome back, everybody. Joe Concha filling in for Steve Malzberg. It is the Steve Malzberg Show. A lovely Tuesday here in New York City. We are actually breaking 40 degrees. Had a little snow earlier, but apparently it's going to be like 55 on Friday, which means lots of melting snow and mud and all that fun stuff that you, unless you live in this area, probably don't care about. But it has been brutal here. So just to see the sun and actually break 32 degrees is a big deal here in the New York, New Jersey area. Well, guys, we've had a great show so far. The fun times will continue. Grace Marie Turner will be joining me for a moment. She's the president of the Galen Institute. She's going to talk about Obamacare's war on jobs. And that CBO report that came out last week that was just so devastating in terms of the job loss as a result of this new law. Ron Christie, Republican strategist, you probably see him often on MSNBC. He'll be joining me as well later in the hour. And then AJ Delgado, who I used to work with over at Mediaite. She is a conservative writer. She does some work for Breitbart. You can pretty much catch her almost anywhere. She's going to join me to talk about NBC's coverage of the Olympics and specifically that repugnant interview with Bodie Miller, where the only goal was to make a guy cry over his dead brother for sensationalism, for ratings. Certainly something that should be discussed more, particularly since it was on tape delay of 20 hours. Producers probably could have cut that and been a little bit more sensitive to Mr. Miller, but instead they went the cheesy route, and we will roast them over the grill during that segment. That is later in the hour. But now, the aforementioned Grace Marie Turner, president of the Galen Institute. She joins me now. Grace Marie, or Grace, should I just call you GMT?
Grace Marie. My mother says both names. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing well. I just...
Joe is a name easy to get.
Yeah. I'm not crazy about my name, Grace. I got to be honest with you, because I am referred to as Joe Sixpack, Average Joe, Joe Schmo.
Joe the plumber?
Yeah, Joe the plumber. So you can call me JC. That may be the better way to go.
Great. You can call me GM.
All right, GM, the GM of the show. Very good. So where are you calling from, by the way? Where do we got you from?
Alexandria, Virginia. We're right across the river from Washington, D.C., and inside the Beltway, but outside the craziness of politics.
Oh, well, I am a University of Maryland Terrapin. I went to Washington often. I don't know if you ever go to a place called Tony and Joe's. It's right on the water.
Oh,
no?
Over in Georgetown.
Yeah.
Yes, great place.
So good stuff down there, and I'm sure a little bit warmer there as well, since I'm obsessed with the weather today for some reason.
Yes, right.
But I wanted to talk to you about, I read your recent story on Obamacare and the war on jobs, as you call it, that CBO report that came out last week, pretty devastating as far as Obamacare possibly costing 2.3 million jobs. Why don't you expand on the CBO report a little bit more for maybe folks that aren't quite in that bubble inside the Beltway, and why not only Obamacare may be not great for the health industry and for people's health plans in terms of losing their doctors, losing their policies, but also being a job killer as well.
It is. There actually was a hearing last summer that I testified before in the House Energy and Commerce Committee talking about the impact of Obamacare on jobs. And it was clear then that employers are freezing hiring. They're putting people on part-time. They are not expanding their companies if they have more than 50 employees. I think that's a big reason that the president has delayed for one more year the employer mandate. But this latest CBO report put a whole new definition on job loss. It basically said that about 2.5 million people will basically withdraw their services from the market because the Obamacare subsidies are so generous that they would lose more in subsidies than they would gain in income. And it's really the equivalent of 2.5 million full-time jobs, which means that as many as 10 million people could withdraw, say, 25% of their services from the market because, as Nancy Pelosi says, they may decide they want to go be artists or become some other recreational activity that doesn't produce income. Well, that's great, except the rest of us are going to be paying for it. So this is just one more piece of the larger puzzle of the damage that this law is doing to the employer sector. I have talked, Joe, with employers who said, just the fines for not providing health coverage to their employers, just the fines, not the cost of the coverage, is more than their profit margin. They said, why on earth should I even open the doors if I'm going to be making no money whatsoever, basically working for the government? And so the administration had to delay the employer mandate for a year, but that's a separate issue. Then these subsidies are so generous that many people will say that it's better to not work than it is to lose the subsidies for Obamacare, which you can fall off a cliff. You can basically lose $5,000 of subsidy for your Obamacare insurance if you work and earn another $100.
So, GM, how do we fix the problem? In other words, it is the law of the land. Currently, the Republicans don't have control of the Senate. That could change during the 2014 midterms. Democrats say, yeah, there are some issues that we'll need to fix. Republicans are more the repeal and replace route. How do you see, just as an objective viewer, how do you see this playing out? Does the law not survive with all these delays, with obviously deductibles going up and people losing their plans? Does it eventually just implode under its own weight because there aren't enough young invincibles there to support it? How do you see this playing out over the next year or two?
There's so many problems with this law. We actually chronicle on our website at Galen.org the 35 changes that already have been made to Obamacare. 18 of them by the president, most of those illegally, but 15 of them by Congress that signed into law by the president. So it is possible to make changes to this law, but it is not possible to fix it. Every single time they make a change, they create 16 more problems. And this law is so out of sync with the way our economy works, the way our political system works, that they have to keep adjusting it and trying to change it to fix it. It's not fixable. Yes, it's going to be very difficult to actually get rid of it before, well, President Obama is in office. I just can't imagine him signing a repeal, but he's changing it himself. In fact, the Wall Street Journal wrote recently, Obama is repealing Obamacare one step at a time. And he really is, because as these various provisions start to take effect, people start to say, wait a minute, people are never going to put up with that. We have to delay this. If people are promised they can keep their plans, let's see if we can retrofit that so that they can keep the plans that they're losing because of Obamacare. If you lose your doctor, seniors having their cuts to their Medicare programs, losing their Medicare Advantage plans, employers having to cut hours and workers because they can't comply with the fines that they otherwise would have to pay. There are dozens of major provisions like that that are going to continue to fall. I've called this law a centipede. There's always another shoe to drop with this law. So I think the 2014, obviously the big difference is whether or not the Republicans take control of the Senate. And if they do, I think you will see a long series of bills going to the president's desk and saying this is the change that we think we need to make to protect our constituents. Oddly, whenever the president has made one of these recommended changes, or has changed the law unilaterally, like the first time he delayed the employer mandate for a year, and then the second time he delayed it, the House last year passed a bill saying, well, we think it's a good idea to delay the employer mandate too, and the president sends up a veto message saying, well, he'd veto it. Well, the House passed it anyway. It goes nowhere in the Senate. If the Republicans take control of the Senate, then those bills will go through both houses of Congress, I predict. They will go to the president's desk, and he'll have to veto bills that allow him to do the very thing he's doing without legal authorization now. So I think it's going to set up a very interesting dynamic. But it's a big admission the law's not working, that they have to keep backstopping and changing it so often.
And not many Democrats standing with the president right now as far as
That's right.
support of the law. And certainly those Democrats running in those blue states or those red states certainly are not going to be welcoming the president when they're campaigning this year. And I would say, honestly, that the Senate is everything. If the Senate does get flipped back to the Republicans, it will create that scenario that you just laid out for everybody, and there'll be nowhere for the president to go. So certainly these midterms are some of the most important that we've seen maybe in our lifetimes, strictly because of this law and all the effects that you laid out. Grace, and I'll call you Grace instead of Grace Marie, thanks so much for joining us from sunny Alexandria and Tony and Joe's. I cannot stress that restaurant enough. The seafood is phenomenal.
Thanks so much, Joe. Nice to talk with you.
Thank you. And we'll be back with more of the Steve Malzberg Show. Joe Concha filling in on this Tuesday in just a moment.
The Steve Malzberg Show.